All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Debbie Abreu. I'm with Kentucky Youth Advocates. And we are going to be having a training today from VIPS on CVI, which is a type of low vision. So I want to thank the Cozier for Kids Face It movement for hosting this training today. Face It is focused on preventing and ending child abuse and neglect and building strengths in families across Kentucky. And we do this by promotion of best practices in prevention and intervention and offering things like the trainings that we're having today. So just a couple of housekeeping things as we get started here. If you can please stay on mute. And if you can please have your cameras on. If you would like to receive training credit for today, it is necessary to have your cameras on. So, and at the end of this training, I'll drop a survey link in the chat, and you would take the survey, which is just a few questions, and then request your training credit. If you don't request the training credit, if you don't complete the survey to request the training credit, then we will not be able to give you credit in ECE TRIS later. So that is about it for housekeeping. So again, thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Paige Menard from VIPS. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Debbie. Well, everyone, I'm very glad to be with you this evening. And isn't everybody so happy that it has stopped raining in Kentucky? I know I am. So I just want to introduce myself. I'm Paige Maynard, and I am with VIPS. And my role at VIPS has been for a very long time in early intervention and preschool as a teacher of the visually impaired and as a certified interdisciplinary early childhood educator. And most recently, I am now the Kentucky Education Lead, which means that I'm overseeing all of the programming in Kentucky. So if you're not familiar with VIPS, you might also want to know a little bit more about VIPS. So we provide critical early vision interventions and parental support, and we are the only nonprofit in Kentucky and Indiana dedicated to empowering families and providing specialized early childhood education for infants and toddlers and preschoolers who are blind and low vision. And we are the first and only nonprofit in Kentucky and Indiana that provides vision-specific early childhood education for children and their families. And most of those services occur through Kentucky Early Intervention, KEIS. And I'm very, very grateful that I also have a very small caseload on KEIS. So that's one of my other favorite parts of my job. We also have the only full-time preschool for students who are blind and low vision. So it is accredited nationally and is a 5-star rated program for child care centers. So that's a little bit about myself and a little bit about VIPS. And I want to know a little bit about you all today. I have been so excited to watch in the chat just your names and where you're from, but tell me about what your role is. So maybe you're a teacher, a caregiver, a therapist, administrator. You might be in the nursing field, or maybe you're somebody else that I didn't think of. So if you don't mind, just take a few moments and put those in the chat so I can learn a little bit more about you. While you're sharing who you are, always feel free if you have questions, just put them in the chat. We'll have a time at the end where we will be just opening up the floor for questions. So you can do it that way as well. All right, I'm seeing lots of teachers, some students, paraeducators, administrators, directors. Seems like many of you are working directly with children, which is great. Thank you all. All right. Thanks. Yeah, keep that going if you haven't shared who you are yet. Okay, so let's talk through what our learning objectives are for this evening. So first of all, we want to be able to describe CVI, cortical or cerebral visual impairment. we want to be able to explain how injury to the brain's visual processing pathways can lead to functional difficulties. And I think usually the most exciting part is when we dive into real strategies. So you're going to get some information about strategies that will be able to support learners who have CVI, and we want to be able to apply those as well. And as we get started, I think it is always fantastic when we can get an opportunity to really see the experiences of somebody who has CVI, cortical or cerebral visual impairment. And along those lines, oftentimes when we're talking about CVI, we just say CVI, but it's cortical or cerebral are oftentimes interchangeable. If you get into study a little bit more, you can kind of get into the, which terminology do you use? But for our purposes, CVI could start with or could stand for cortical or cerebral visual impairment. Right, everybody cross your fingers that hopefully our video will work.
Got safety protocols? Granger has the safety pros to call. Shop our vast inventory.
If you can hear this, if you don't mind, just give me a thumbs up on
Would
your
you believe
camera.
me if I say that there's nothing wrong with my eyes, but I'm vision impaired? My name is Raphael, and I have a condition called cerebral vision impairment, or CVI for short. CVI affects the way I see the world, not because of my eyes, but because of my brain. Normally, the eyes send electrical signals to the brain, which turns them into images we see. But for people with CVI, these signals get muddled. For me, that's because when I was born, my blood sugar level was low, and I developed a condition called hypoglycemia.
A huge proportion of our brains are devoted to creating a picture inside our minds. That creation of the picture takes up at least 40% of the whole brain's visual function.
People with normal vision can see multiple things at the same time. You probably can see several signs all at once, but I can only see one thing at a time. And the more stressed I get, the fewer things I can see.
The thing with CVI is that you can't, it's really hard. It's like a miner's torch. So you're focusing on one thing at a time. And if you want to see something else in the scene, you take your vision away from where you were looking to another thing, but then you don't know where the first thing was in relation to the second thing.
The amount of information I have to process when I'm walking can be a challenge. Sometimes, when people greet me on the street, I can't see them clearly.
So if you think about it like the old computers when I was young, when that first came out, basically if you had too many applications open on the computer, they would freeze, or you'd have to reboot the computer to start it again. So it's a little bit like that for people with CVI.
Common social interactions can be a challenge for someone with CVI. That is why many people like myself are often mistakenly diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder.
The majority of people, though, have a problem with vision in which they have difficulty interacting with other people. They are unable to find somebody in a group or see somebody in the distance because clutter is a big problem.
I am learning how to live with CVI. When I am walking in an unfamiliar place, I look back every 10 seconds to collate landmarks to create a map in my mind. And I'm not the only one living with CVI.
In the region of 3.5% has recently been found to have cerebral visual impairment. That's an enormous number of children. It's one child in every class.
Yeah, I was having thoughts about that actually.
Acknowledging my disability has opened up my mind to new horizons. My disability doesn't define me.
Raphael has come on a lot in the last 12 months since he graduated, and is the editor of our Voice newsletter, which goes out to over 1,000 participants in our community. We can have...
I studied and graduated from university with a journalism degree.
Yeah.
Now I am working as the editor of a newsletter, surrounded by people who value my work and accept me for who I am.
All right, thank you all. All right, I'm going to exit out of this video and hop back to our presentation, and We will get there here soon. All right, shake your head yes, or just give me a thumbs up if you can see my presentation again. All right, wonderful. Okay. All right, thanks, Farah. All right, so I just wanted to give you a little bit of just something to kind of whet your palate about CVI. And I really love that video because I think it's great to see someone who is an adult who is successful, who has CVI, and just the way that he experiences the world. So I hope that that was meaningful for you. So as we dive into this information, I would love to share with you first some information about visual processing and its impact on functional vision. So first of all, you might be wondering what CVI really is. And I'm going to give you an opportunity, just if you have ever heard of CVI, just put the letter Y in the chat. If you have not, you can put a letter N. All right, I'm seeing some Y's, I'm seeing some N's. So we look like we might be pretty split. A lot of N's coming in. All right. All right. This is your guys' lucky day. You're going to get to hear all about CVI today. All right, so as more of those answers come in, I thank you all for sharing those. But what CVI is it's a specific type of low vision where the brain has difficulty interpreting what the eyes are telling it. So we have this big world of blindness and low vision, and under that umbrella is CVI. And this definition that I have up here in the slide gives a more detailed definition of that, and this is the most recent criteria for it, which was in 2023 at a CVI workshop. But one of the things I think to note about CVI is we're still working on developing what the true medical diagnosis and definition and criteria for it are. So as you learn more about CVI, you will probably get more information, and there you'll see some updates on the way that we're defining it. All right, the question next is, well, why does CVI matter? CVI matters because it is the leading cause of blindness and low vision in young children in developed countries. Many of us may have never heard of it before, hence the no's that were in the chat, and many people that are around us in the public don't know a lot about CVI because when we see blindness and low vision in the media or things like that, oftentimes we're thinking someone with the sunglasses and a white cane, and that's not always what blindness and low vision looks like. So CVI matters because it is so common, and it impacts the understanding of the way that the brain receives information from the eyes. Its impact can range from mild to significant, and it is most often associated with injury to the brain in early childhood, either prenatally or postnatally. And one of the interesting things about CVI as compared to other types of blindness and low vision is that oftentimes it gets better with intervention strategies because of neuroplasticity. So the great thing about brains is they can learn, and we can learn to see. And also it spans the intellectual range. So I have some videos that you'll see later on with kiddos kind of variety of development, and you'll be able to kind of see how it's impacting some of them. I see Madison says the only way Paige isn't cutting in and out is if she has her camera off. Is anybody else having trouble with my audio? Okay, I'm seeing head shakes no, so hopefully you guys can get that worked out. All right, let's dive deeper into how CVI is different from other conditions. So, like I was sharing, when we think of blindness and low vision, we have this umbrella of many different types of blindness and low vision. And oftentimes our minds think about those ocular conditions, which means that there might be something going on with eyes. Maybe there's a part of the eye that doesn't work very well, or a part of the eye that's missing. That's not what we're talking about here with CVI. When we talk about CVI, we are talking about how the brain interprets what the eyes are telling it. So in that video, you saw that the man that was in the video, he was talking about how his brain was what was impacting his vision. So that's how CVI is different from other conditions. And CVI can be suspected when there's a normal eye exam. Kiddos might maybe have some different types of behaviors and some unique characteristics, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. CVI can be diagnosed by an ophthalmologist or a neurologist or a neuro-ophthalmologist. And the characteristics and behaviors of CVI, of children who have CVI, can vary. So just like I was sharing before, these kids can have quote unquote normal eyes. So their eye exam may come back normal, but we might experience in their behaviors that they don't look at things in the same way that kids with typical vision do. Like maybe they miss things whenever there's a cluttered environment, or whenever they are interacting with something, they look away while they're reaching, or maybe they only notice things up close but not far away, or when they're sitting up, they have trouble using their vision, but when they're laying down, then their vision seems to get better. So they might act like they can see sometimes, but then not at other times, because the way that our brain processes, it can process different things at different times, and depending on the types of stimuli that we have, there might be a lot going on, and we kind of have to turn our vision off if we have CVI. We might also see individuals who have CVI maybe staring at lights, but not looking at people, or maybe liking to look out the window. They might only look at things of certain colors, or they might only alert to things that move. They can oftentimes be overwhelmed in loud or busy or really active environments. And again, they might not look whenever they reach for things. So these are some kind of red flag behaviors that you might see in kids with CVI. And let's talk about the conditions that are associated with CVI, because after today, you guys are going to be our CVI ambassadors. Like I shared, many people don't know about CVI, and today you're going to leave and you're going to know more about CVI. And if you meet a child who has any of these conditions, you might think, oh, wait, these could possibly be some red flags for CVI. So some of these are lack of oxygen to the brain, especially as part of birth trauma. Also, we see hydrocephalus, infections of the brain, seizures, infantile spasms, sometimes children who have chromosomal differences. We would also maybe take a look to see if CVI is present. Injury to the white matter in the brain, PVL, so that's associated with cerebral palsy, or CP. So just some of those conditions associated with CVI. So if you're working with any of those kiddos that have those needs, just kind of have that in the back of your mind. I'll be looking at that child's visual processing. And then as we talk about what vision is, I want you all to get kind of an opportunity to be able to experience that. So when we used to explain how vision works and how our eyes see, we used to think of seeing as the eye sending a picture to the brain. So just this little picture here, let's look at how there's a baby who looks like they're about to flip, or they're upside down or something. And if we imagine that the eye is like a TV camera, it gets the message of the baby who is doing whatever the visual target is. And if we compare it to like a TV set, the camera goes to the TV and then we get an image. And we used to think about how the eye would just go to the brain and we get an image, but it's so much more complicated than that. It's so much more complicated because our brain uses color, it uses shape, it uses context, it uses even prior experiences to try to make sense of the information that we're getting. So people who have typical vision oftentimes don't think about how you have mental maps inside your brain for where things are. I don't know about you, but sometimes in the morning I'll get ready with the lights off, and because I just don't want to turn the lights on because I'm tired. And my different toiletries and things like that, I have the lights off, but I can still find them where they are because I just kind of remember. And even though I see, just a little shadow, I know like, oh, that's my face cream. I'll put that on. We also have a picture dictionary inside our minds, and anything that we see that might be unfamiliar, our brain takes that unfamiliar image or that unfamiliar experience, and it kind of rifles through all of our prior experiences, and it thinks, okay, what is this most like? What might this be? And later on, you're going to get an experience to kind of see how that might feel for an unfamiliar experience. So that's kind of how our brain works. It's more than just sending visual information to the brain and the brain understanding it. Our brain has to do a lot to figure out and to process visual information. And you can imagine for these children who have CVI, how complicated the world must feel like sometimes if they don't have someone or they don't have strategies to be able to process the environment. And speaking of that, we'll go a little bit deeper into the visual system. You can see here in this diagram that anything above this blue line here is all our visual system, and anything below is our visual processing areas. And just like the video said, so much of the brain is devoted to visual processing, and you can even see it here in this diagram. I know this is very simplistic, but I think it's just amazing to see how the brain processes visual information. And this is, just a little example. So we're going to do a little bit of an activity here, and we're going to think about how the different parts of our brain see. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your two hands and I want you to put them on top of your head with your thumbs kind of to the back and your fingers kind of on the top of your head. And we're going to feel the different parts of our brain, okay? So I want you to kind of tap your thumbs on the back of your head here. So you are touching where your occipital lobe is in your brain. All right, I want you, the palms of your hand, I want you to press those on the sides of your head. That's going to be your temporal lobe. Okay. Now take your fingers where they are on the top of your head. We're going to find our parietal lobe. And then I want you to move your hands to your forehead. All right, and we're going to find our frontal lobe, okay? All those parts of the brain are parts of the brain that use our vision. So if you think back to your occipital lobe, when visual information goes to your brain, your occipital lobe is the part of your brain where the picture is actually made. And I think that is absolutely fantastic and amazing. It connects the picture that you see to memories that you have. So after visual information hits the occipital lobe, after it travels through your eyes all the way to your occipital lobe from your optic nerves, your brain does lots of things, but from a simplistic explanation, visual information goes from your occipital lobe to your temporal lobe. So remember, that's where your palms were on the sides of your head. Your temporal lobe plays a role in visual memory, and it helps you to identify things. So I'm looking at all of you right now. I'm seeing some of you that I recognize glasses are on your face. I'm seeing that some of you guys are in your kitchens or in your living rooms, and I recognize that because my temporal lobe is allowing me to do that. So let's talk about what the parietal lobe does. So remember, that was here on the top. So it works closely with the frontal lobe, but the other things that it does are it helps our brain to understand where things are in space. So as I am sharing this information with you, I know that my screen is right in front of me and it is next to the other screen that I have here with my presentation on it. And that is because my parietal lobe is doing its job. And next, let's talk about our frontal lobes. Our frontal lobe, its job is to help us to visually attend and consciously visually attend. I know that sometimes the 7 o'clock training might be a little bit hard to attend to, so you can thank your frontal lobe for helping you make the choice to stay with me. So if you can imagine, what would happen if we have injury to any of those lobes of the brain? So if we have injury to the front part of the brain, we might have difficulty with visual focus. If we have injury to the occipital lobe, we actually might have some difficulty even seeing like what the picture is. So we might kind of have in our brain a visual field loss that isn't associated with our eyes. For our temporal and parietal lobes, some of the things that we might experience are difficulties with eye-hand coordination, with reaching, with learning to associate what we see with its name, and being able to kind of access that visual memory. So I'm sure you all can imagine in early childhood how this would be impacting kiddos. So if you don't mind, just go ahead and put something in the chat that maybe you might see that injury to one of these parts of the brain might impact. So for example, I might think of an infant who is learning to open their mouth for their bottle, and maybe they have injury to the brain, so they might have difficulty seeing where the bottle is. So you can type that in the chat, or maybe you can think of something on your own. How might this look in a child who is in early childhood? All right, Kirsten says reaching for a ball. Yeah, our reach might not be accurate. Playing with toys might be hard. Trying to get to a spoon or fork could be hard. Where to put crayon on paper? Yeah, knowing the relationship between two things. We might see stumbling sometimes, knowing where we are in space, our own body. Yeah, oftentimes we see walking as a late milestone in children who have CVI and any blindness and low vision. We'll see that later. Trying to self-feeding, knowing the relationship between where the food is and where our hand is and where our mouth is. Using a water fountain, that's a great thought. Yeah, that could be challenging. All right, thank you all. All right, so next thing that we're going to talk about are some of those behavioral and functional characteristics of CVI. And you guys have already kind of started thinking about that. So great job, everybody. So as we think about CVI, one of my favorite kind of perspectives is from a researcher and teacher whose name is Dr. Christine Roman-Lancy. And she, as part of her work, came up with these 10 visual behavioral characteristics of CVI. So we'll kind of talk through each one, because anytime I work with an individual with CVI, my brain automatically goes to, okay, what am I seeing? And what are the implications of that? And if whenever you're observing and working with learners who have CVI, if you think about these 10 characteristics, not only can it help you to be a good observer of their functional vision, but also it can help you to develop strategies that support the use of their vision. So oftentimes we'll see a color preference, and that color preference is very frequently red or yellow. It's not always, but we think about, why is a stop sign red? Why is the McDonald's logo red and yellow? Probably because somebody realized red and yellow tell our brains to look, and they tell the brains of someone who has CVI to look also. Oftentimes individuals with CVI might need movement. So that might look like wiggling something. Like if something is wiggled, they might have better visual attention. Or many of the learners that I work with who have CVI their families might share that, man, they don't look at a whole lot of things, but when the dog runs past, they visually alert. So we might maybe see that. We oftentimes will see visual latency, which means a delay in looking. So we need more processing time in order to use our vision. We oftentimes see a visual field preference. Oftentimes it is for the left or the right. And then as functional vision gets better, we add more visual fields and our vision gets stronger. Most often we will see difficulties in the lower visual field. Let's think about the implications for that for learning. We've got walking, mobility, and where do we hold books? Down here oftentimes. So oftentimes literacy is going to be impacted. We also find a need for light. So oftentimes individuals with CVI are very attracted to light, and sometimes that can be distracting for them. But think about if we use that to our advantage to help direct their visual attention. We oftentimes see difficulty with distance viewing because the environment at a distance is very visually cluttered. If you remember from the video, the man who the story was about, he was looking at all of those stores that were along the street, and there were many for him to look at, and he had trouble seeing them all at once. We often see atypical visual reflexes, which would look like if something comes quickly toward the face, that we might not always see a blink reflex. So think about the implications in early childhood. When we blink our eyes, it keeps us safe if something's coming at us. So that's something to remember. We see some difficulties with visual novelty, which I'm going to let you guys experience here pretty soon, which looks like trouble with kind of visual generalization. So, do I know that this new spoon that I have seen is also a spoon because I've seen another spoon before, but it looks kind of different than the one that I know. And oftentimes individuals with CVI will struggle with that. We often see looking away while reaching, or just kind of turning vision off when using our hands or using our body to move. And then lastly, we often see difficulties with visual complexity, which means if the environment is loud, if there are someone is talking while they're trying to do an activity, they might have trouble keeping their visual attention on what the target is. If someone's wearing a highly patterned shirt, it might be harder for them to pay attention to what the activity that the person is showing to them. And faces we also consider are very visually complex as well, because we have 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth, and they're also not super high contrast. So sometimes that can be challenging for individuals with CVI. Okay, let's watch some young children with CVI. And as we watch each of the videos, in the chat, I just want you to put what you notice. If you remember any of those characteristics, I know I went through them pretty quickly just because we don't have a whole lot of time, but just share what you notice about what's happening. So for the first little one we're going to watch is Savannah, and I'm going to try to make this video full screen, and you are going to hear me from 2020, and I don't love how I sound, and you're going to just see me big on the screen, but it's one of those videos where it's like, it shows her really well, and I'm like, oh, I want to cut myself out. All right, give me a thumbs up if you can see the video large. Okay. All right, I want you to watch what she does while she's playing.
About it, and I guess that's because she can't necessarily see it very clearly.
Her mom's also
but
talking here
like
too.
she'll stop and think of like, this happened, or like right now she's staring at this. So that's why I turned this. And
Yeah,
he's very much of a thinker.
yeah.
And yeah.
Watching you, Savannah, because you're a big girl and you can do big things. She's tracking the movement. Yeah, so she is, she's alerting to the movement here. You can see that.
Her level of
This setup is something
being in there.
It's focusing on one thing at a time.
And it makes
Great.
sense to me because like it's giving her brain a chance to focus on, there you go. You get your ball. I guess it's because she can focus on like one thing.
All right. Yeah, great watching you all. So you can see Savannah's preferred color was green. So that's the reason that there are so many green things in here in her little room. But you can also see the way that we with working with her, use strategies to be able to support her in using her vision and using her body. Did you see how at the end of the video, she moved her arm and she did some reaching? To me, what I'm seeing when I watch that is that she spent all that time trying to focus on something. So we see her visual latency, and then we see her coordinated movement. So you're watching that entire process happen with all of these things. So, all right, let's watch another one. This is my favorite part. We could do this all day, couldn't we? Or at least I could. All right, this is a little guy. I believe his name is Talon, and I want you to notice in his video what he does when he activates this toy. It's so interesting.
Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Show me what you got.
Is he so cute? You just want to like give him a little kiss and a hug. Okay, that was a quick one, but what do you notice about what he did when he was activating the toy? What did he more specifically do? What did he do before he activated it? He was reaching, he was trying to get it. He was moving his hands. Okay, Catherine, you're right. He looked down, he looked away every time he reached for the toy. I'm gonna show you guys one more time because if Catherine got it, I want you guys to get it too. Okay, all right, watch him. He's gonna look down or look away every time he reaches. All right, do you see? He just looked away and then reached.
What you got?
Mm-hmm. He's so cute. Okay, let's do one more. I'm going to show you my friend Micah, and I want you to watch. This one I maybe have less questions because I need to describe to you what's going to happen. But in this video, Micah's mom is going to be giving him little pieces of food, and she's going to be putting them on different backgrounds. Okay, we wouldn't really do this in real life working in early childhood. This is just kind of them demonstrating one of the characteristics of complexity with kiddos who have CVI. And you're going to see how his ability to find this piece of food on the background changes as the background gets more complex. You're also going to see that he really wants to like get this over with and read his book, which is also cute. Shelby has a question before we start. Is it normal in this situation their eyes are more focused toward the corner of the eye? Like it looks like he is looking at his nose in the second video. Yeah, oftentimes we'll see what's called like eccentric viewing or a like a down and to the side gaze, and that's fairly common in individuals with CVI. So yeah, that could be something to look out for. Yeah. All right, so he sees it right there on the yellow. I want to read my book, Mom. Now we have two colors in the pattern. Took him longer, right? Now we're more complex. Look at him, look for it. He does not like the camera. I agree with that. He's like, he's ready to do something else. She was very kind to film those for me for training purposes. Okay, look, and then he found it when she pointed out where it was. So I want you to think about as well, like when we think about kids in this age group, like specifically for all of these things, you can see how their vision is impacting their participation in these activities. So for Micah, no, we're not going to put food on on a towel, different kind of backgrounds. But think about if we're trying to find something in an array, or if we're trying to find a picture in a book, that could be challenging for somebody with CVI, and you could kind of be able to watch that. Okay, so I'm thinking about our time, and I'm going to just give a little bit of information here. As we talk a little bit more about the way that our brain works as far as visual processing, I was talking to you about first when the visual message goes from the eye and the optic nerve to the brain to our visual cortex and our occipital lobe. Our brain processes where things are and what things are. And really, that's kind of what this diagram shows. So over here on the right side, you see dorsal stream, the where stream. So we've got this arrow here that goes up into our parietal lobe. So our brain's job visually is to know where things are. And also our brain's job is to know what things are. So our ventral stream, where information comes there as well, is going to tell us what things are. So this is just to kind of help our minds kind of wrap around that when we see and when kids see, it's so much more than looking at things. They have to know where they are and what they are. We're going to skip past these slides. If you want to know more about dorsal and ventral stream, we will share the slides after this presentation. But for now, I think we're going to be benefited from moving on. I really like to show this picture, this diagram here about the brain of someone who has CVI. So these are all functional images of people who have varying levels of vision. So you can see all of the neural connections here in someone who has quote unquote normal, typical vision, and how many that there are and how strong that they look. Then if we look here at someone who has ocular visual impairment, so again, that would be blindness and low vision where the eyes are impacted, but the brain is not impacted, we can see how the brain still uses those neural connections for vision. Oftentimes they're used for other things, or if the person has any sort of functional vision, the brain can still use vision for that. But then if we compare the neural connections of someone with CVI for vision, you can see how weak those are and how there are fewer of them. So I love to show this because if we really see what it might look like if we were thinking about all of those neural connections, I really think it helps us get a better idea of what might be kind of going on, from a neurological standpoint. And again, as we talked about in the beginning, I think one of the most exciting things about working with individuals with CVI is that neuroplasticity is a real thing. We can learn to make more visual connections, and we can learn to strengthen those neural connections. And with the support of a caring adult and a caring teacher, caring family, that is what makes that happen. So I think it's just absolutely magical to think about that. I see some questions up in the chat, and I think they're probably best if we keep going because you might maybe get some answers as we go on, especially individual strategies. All right. So when we think about how individuals with CVI might have fewer and weaker neural connections for vision, and we think about how the brain makes guesses based upon previous experience, and how our brains have this, you have this Rolodex of things that you have seen in the past. And if you see an image like this, you immediately recognize what it is, right? But how closely does that actually resemble an apple? That does not look like an apple, other than we have the salient features that it's red, it's kind of rounded at the top, it has a leaf. A lot of apples you get in the grocery store don't even have a leaf, so that really doesn't look like a lot like an apple, and sometimes they don't have a stem. So if we think about for someone that has typical vision, that's easy for us to do, but that might not be as easy for someone who has CVI. And then does this actually look at like what a boat looks like? No, your brain right now is going through all of those prior images that you've seen before of a boat, and it's making some really big jumps. But the brain of someone who has CVI, because of the way that their neural connections are still looking to develop, they might not do that automatically. So that's what I wanted to share. Let's play a couple more games because we've been heavy on the information. Okay, I want you as quickly as you can find the toothbrush. Okay, I don't know what you found, but did you find this one? I just saw Kirsten's face go, oh! So your brain was looking for what your brain was telling you a toothbrush looked like, and sometimes you might miss the really big thing that's in the picture, right? Or maybe you saw the other one and you were just looking for what's big, but think about what your brain literally just missed in that instance. And if you think about that experience for people who might have CVI, isn't that crazy? So, okay, let's play another game. Okay, next I want you to find the tiger mask in the pile of toys. I see, it's so fun to watch you all and watch your eyes. And I see, like, if you found it, you like sit back. So you have typical vision or many of you have typical vision. And this is challenging. For an individual with CVI, this could feel like an impossible task. And how often maybe are we telling them like, clean up your toys. This one goes here and this one goes there. They literally might not be able to see where something goes and to be able to visually sort through the items. Okay, this is my absolute favorite thing to do when we talk about CVI. This is a little bit of a simulation. So I want you to take a look at this picture, and this picture is going to simulate that difficulty with visual generalization, okay? So this picture is of a thing that I am certain that everybody, if not almost everybody in this meeting would know about and be able to recognize. So I want you to see if you can kind of guess what it is, and maybe you can put in the chat what your guess is. Some people see a foot. Right, we have a lot of people who are really thinking. A horse, a cat. Looks like sidewalk. It's kind of a grainy picture, but we need it to be grainy to kind of make it a little bit more challenging. A lot of people ask me whenever they look at this picture, do people with CVI really see like this? No, that we're not saying that everybody with CVI is seeing grainy images. It's just to kind of support. Okay, so if you guessed cow, you're right. And I'm going to tell you that that is the most people I've ever had guess correctly. So give yourself a big pat on the back if you guessed cow. If you are still looking at this picture saying, how on earth is this a cow? Well, what your brain might be doing is it might, Sharon says me. So what your brain might be doing is it's looking for what are the important parts? What are the things that you have seen before that this makes sense? And it goes into your little mental Rolodex of pictures. So if I tell you, all right, this is an ear and this is an ear. Does that help? I just saw a bunch of heads shake yes. This is an eye and this is an eye and that's a nose. That's crazy, right? So again, if we think about individuals with CVI, sometimes strategies like this, where if the child isn't sure what something is, if we talk through what are the things that make this a cow? Well, the shape of the ears, the way that the nose is shaped, that can help to visually understand and make sense of what the picture or the object is. Okay, that was fun. I think that's the last one, but let's see. All right, making sense of limit. Okay. This one, I have actually never been able to find Waldo. So if you can, great for you. But many people with CVI really have a hard time processing when there's a lot of information. So this is kind of that image that I showed you with the tiger mask. So did anybody find Waldo? He's by the number 1 sign. Okay, thank you. Now we all have to find the number 1 sign. Oh, all right. Do you see him right here on the top right? Yay. Okay, that was fun. Okay, so we had fun playing our games. Now let's talk about the impact of CVI in early development and why is it so important for an early diagnosis. So we know, and I've shared with you throughout this time together, that early intervention leads to more neural connections and stronger neural connections, and that is the most important thing. Also, kind of in saying that, the community of people who are blind and low vision, also they recognize, and we recognize that sometimes with CVI, vision is just unreliable, and we're not going to build enough neural connections for the person to become sighted, but we can also think about using other senses as well. So we use auditory and we use the tactile sense for learning, and those are also appropriate. But the earlier that we know that a child might be impacted with CVI, the earlier that we can start those strategies to either help them to compensate for what they're visually missing out on, or to help them to use the vision that they have and develop the vision that they have. We also see that if we make things easier to see for kids, their social behaviors improve, and they're able to interact a lot easier. And we see challenging behaviors can sometimes be decreased. So if those things, of course, are related to vision. All right, now the fun part. If you already haven't had fun today, I had fun playing those games with you all. But let's talk about strategies to support functional vision in learning and daily routines, because that's why we're all here. We're working with kids, we're interacting with kids on a daily basis or on a regular basis, and we want to know how to be able to support them. Okay, so I talked a bit before about Dr. Roman Lancey's characteristics of CVI and the CVI range. Actually, I didn't share about the CVI range. This slide does talk about it. So when we think about CVI, anytime that we're interacting with someone who has CVI in a sense where we want to be able to support their visual access to things, the best thing that we can do is observe their behaviors, observe which characteristic we are looking at, and we can make modifications to the activity, the way that we interact, the setup, so that it supports those characteristics. We'll get into a little bit more of that, but really that's where our minds can go when we want to think about supporting them. Okay, so some things that make it more difficult for the brain to see would be if the object has lots of colors on it. So if you see this little, so many babies have this toy, it looks like a phone, like with a button on it. Visually, that might be challenging to see, but this red toy that's a solid color can be much easier for the child to be able to see. We also see that when the complexity of the array is really busy, it can be challenging for the child to know where to direct their visual attention. And oftentimes, like this is oftentimes when I see challenging behaviors, is when the complexity is too much. So you can hopefully even see for yourself in this image of a teacher who's reading a book to the class, how much easier it is to focus on the fish. That's part of, I think this is brown bear, how much easier it is to focus on this fish when she has a black background behind her and she's wearing a solid colored shirt, as compared to when she has the typical classroom setup behind her. So that's a strategy that can be implemented. Some other things would be when the environment is noisy, when there's a lot going on, that can make it challenging. So I would encourage this strategy to be developed in conjunction with a teacher of the visually impaired, but sometimes something like those headphones that decrease sound can be a really, really helpful tool. But we don't want to make it so that the child isn't accessing the world at all. So I would say consult with a teacher of the visually impaired about that one for individual students. And then as far as faces go, sometimes it can be really challenging for someone with CVI to recognize a face. And we'll talk about strategies for that. But one thing that you can easily do when you're interacting with someone with CVI is to say, introduce yourself every time that you interact with them. So if I enter the room or a child enters the room and I know that they have CVI or any blindness and low vision, I can say, "Hi, so-and-so, it's Paige. I'm glad to see you." So if you use an auditory cue instead, it can be very helpful. Another thing that you can do is if you wear a specific thing all the time, like if you have big glasses that you always wear, or a name tag or something like that, you can call attention to that visually, because that gives a visual anchor, the same way that when we were talking about the cow and I showed you the ears, that gives a visual anchor for the child to be able to reference, to be able to recognize you. We also sometimes see that distance could be challenging, because the further things are away, the more there is to visually process. So think about this pantry. If we were to just look at one shelf, there'd only be 2 or 3 things on it. But if we look at it all at the same time, we have to visually sort through all of those. So that might be challenging for a learner with CVI. Visual and motor, as we've already talked about, can be challenging. Using vision and motor at the same time is pretty complex. And if we know that dorsal stream is having difficulty with processing where things are in space, we kind of get all of these challenges with that. And then again, unfamiliar items. You guys had a couple of visually novel experiences just now that were challenging for you. And if there isn't a visual memory, or a strong visual memory with all of those neural connections, it might take longer to decide where to look and to use the energy to kind of figure out what that thing is. Okay, so what are things that actually are going to make it easier for the brain to see? The first one, and the easiest thing usually for folks to latch onto, is color. So remember, I shared with you with the 10 visual behavioral characteristics that color is one of those. If we select items for that child in their preferred color, we are much more likely to get a visual response of looking and a visual response of recognizing, because we know those are 2 different things. A child can look at something and not recognize it, and we want them to do both, okay? So we can, like this photo here shows a scrunchie that's around the child's arm. A lot of children with CVI don't develop hand regard. They don't have that. But what we can do is if we put something that makes their hand easier to see around their wrist, then they're more likely to look. We can do this with all kinds of things. We can put red tape around their cubby in their classroom. We can choose a red spoon if that's their preferred color. If we want them to look at us, maybe we wear a red shirt, or if you're really crazy, you go out and get red glasses or a red headband with all the little crazy things on it. So there's so many things you can do with color to be able to support learners. Another thing that we can do is we can add light to what we want for the child to see. So that could look like using a light box or a light board to be able to backlight items. It can look like using tablets, mindfully, of course, to present things. Sometimes videos really can be your best friend for individuals with CVI, especially like a video of something that has happened and you want to teach. Okay, you saw this dog in real life. Now I want you to watch a video of it, because they would have a hard time immediately jumping from one of those to the other. So sometimes a video can help. And then sometimes even just shining a flashlight on what we want for them to look at. Like, think about how much fun it would be to read a book where you have the book and you have a flashlight and you shine it on the individual pictures that are in the book, and how that would support visual attention for looking. We also see what we can do for movement. How can we support their needs for movement? So we can wiggle the object that we want them to look at. We can provide them with lots of opportunities to move in their environment, because that movement wakes up their visual system. But if we're trying to get them to look at an individual item, we can put shiny stuff on it. At VIPS, we love to cut up Mylar balloons and put them on things that are shiny. We love our shiny Mardi Gras beads. We love our bouncing slinkies that go up and down because that has really great movement to it. And there's also a picture of a lava lamp in here that, that might be appropriate for some kids. What do we do when we're thinking about visual novelty? So again, that would be that challenge with generalizing something that's unfamiliar to that mental Rolodex of images that the brain might have. So using things that the child is familiar with helps them build strong memories. So just some examples of things that I have done with children that I've worked with were to use something like their Elmo doll and take pictures of it and put it in a book. And then, Elmo's on the top of the page or the bottom of the page. Or maybe we work on looking in various, places in the home, and we put Elmo in different places and we say, find Elmo. And so that can be a fun activity. As far as preferred fields goes, sometimes this one can be one of the most obvious, but not always the easiest to do just because of positioning. But presenting objects in the child's best visual field helps them look. And again, just a reminder that children who have CVI might more often have a visual preference to the sides in comparison to a central visual field or the lower visual field. So we could approach them from the side. We could present their book to the side. Or we could present their book up, outside of that lower visual field. But oftentimes it's going to be to the left or the right, and also it could be up as well. I'm going to share some more general guidelines. So the first one is that if you work with a child who has a VIPS teacher, collaborating with the VIPS teacher is really the best way to go. Or if the child has a teacher of the visually impaired already, of course, we want to collaborate with them. So we modify the activity or the environment using assessment information. And what that would mean is all children who have CVI should have some sort of visual assessment within their file. If they don't, maybe you could be the person to advocate that that might be something that they could get. And we can modify what they are doing and what we're presenting specifically to their needs. And the reason I like to say that is because this red here, like we have a red pom-pom and we have an elephant with red around its important parts to help us to know what it is. But for some children, it's appropriate that they practice looking at a red pom-pom, and it might not be appropriate that they learn to recognize an elephant based upon their development. And, the same is true for vice versa, where we want to make sure we're doing what's appropriate for the child. I've already talked about using multiple sensory modalities. Just because we know that there are more neural connections that can be made doesn't mean that we also can't do auditory and tactile as well. So thinking about that can be great. And then this next one here, hand under hand. If you don't mind, just to put a letter H in the chat if you've ever heard of hand under hand strategy before. And this is different than hand over hand. All right, several of you have. Great. All right, we see some no's. We see some H's. Thanks. Okay. So the research behind hand under hand is it's a tactile strategy to use to help with modeling tactile skills and with building trust and with joint attention. So if you don't remember anything else from today, let this be one of the things to remember. I, like many other teachers of the visually impaired, are on a mission to stop hand over hand from being in our repertoire skills for kids who are blind and low vision. Because when we present our hand underneath the child's hand and we let their little hand take a ride on ours to, go to reach and grasp something, to find something and explore it, then that child is building neural connections because they have to take an active role in exploring and joining in with us, and it builds trust. Also think about, many of you have, if you've been to a carnival or a fair or something and you have to put your hand in those yucky bags of whatever it is, if someone can't see what we are making their hand touch and we're grabbing onto their hand, think about how that severs trust. So when working with any child, anybody who is blind or low vision, we want to use hand under hand. So we just gently put our hand under theirs and we say, hey, can I help you explore the dog? Oh, let's stack blocks together. And then we do it this way. So this being the child's hand and then the adult's hand underneath. And I would love to do more and more training on hand under hand, but unfortunately we don't have more time than that. All right, some more general guidelines. Reducing complexity can look like, if you think back to that video with Savannah, do you remember how we had that black around her and we were blocking out all of the information? If you remember the video with Talon and he was hitting that toy, you may not have noticed, but they had a black towel draped up behind that toy so that it blocked out the other visual information. You might not be able to do that just depending on what your situation is. Sometimes you're trying to modify things in a pinch, but think about what the visual environment looks like if a child is faced toward the wall versus faced toward the entire group of other children. So you can just turn them around to the corner. So that can be a great thing to do. Giving wait time is great for our visual latency. Adding movement can look like wiggling the object, adding mylar, adding glitter, adding whatever that it is that simulates that movement, something shiny. And then we also love descriptions and real concrete experiences. Think about if you had only ever seen a picture of something. I know that we all have that experience, and then you see the real thing in real life, how different that is. And, we know for learners with CVI that they're going to be challenged in being able to recognize that picture in the first place. So if we just go to concrete experiences, that's the best. All right, so some of our gross motor routines, let's talk about those. So you can see for head and trunk control, using just things that are familiar to the child can be really helpful. So this little guy has a familiar pom-pom and they've added light to it. And mom here is, got her arms supporting him and giving him lots of support so he can look to the side. We oftentimes in individuals with CVI, we might see that they have difficulty with coordinating like a transitional movement. So like rolling over or going from laying to like sitting up, because those skills and those behaviors, learning to do that, oftentimes those are they're very much visually learned. So if we think about like where the positioning of the thing is that we want for them to move toward, that can kind of help us sometimes. So we want for this little guy to look to the side and reach. So we're supporting him with that. Right, these are some strategies for early literacy. So one of the first things I like to talk about again is pairing real objects with books. So you can see down here, we've got a little homemade book where they've taken a picture of the child's favorite toy, which is an O-ball, and they've just added it to a photo album or, a black little book. So that gives us that black background. We also see pairing, we've already talked about pairing real objects, but if we select high contrast books with one image per page, that helps with that difficulty with visual complexity, because we want to get way far away from the where's the tiger mask and where's Waldo. We want to be here on the real concrete item that's easy for us to find. And again, we want to use texture and use sound. And I love this book that's about bedtime because it's about a real experience that a young child would have, and it has touch and feel elements to it too. So we have some concrete experiences and we have texture and sound. You might think about some of your fine motor routines. So reaching, batting, grasping, and releasing. I absolutely love putting a curtain of Mardi Gras beads that hang down for really young children on a light box or a light board, and they hang, and then the child can get that backlit aspect, and then it promotes their reaching, especially if they're inside lying or like this little guy is sitting up. If we're working on container play, it's so much fun to put a puck light in the bottom of a container, and you can put little things in there that kind of let light come through, like these little balls. And that's a really, really fun and really visually engaging activity. You can also think about if we have lower visual field difficulties, we want to bring those things up. So as much as we can, bring those things up. For those of you all who are working with children who are a little bit older, early childhood, things like puzzles can be really challenging for kids who are blind and low vision just in general. But some things that we can do are think about the array. So less pieces in the puzzle is better. And if we have those puzzles that have like, it's like a scene where it's like, I'm thinking of like a specific Melissa and Doug one where there's like a dog and a house and a window and a door. If we just cover all of that with like black paper and then we only have the pieces that go in and out, that can be really helpful if you can like find some black contact paper or something. You might also have some communication routines if you're greeting children as they come in the door in the mornings, or you're having social interactions with infants or whoever that it is. One of the best things to do is just wait for their visual attention, or just wait for their attention in general. And it might not be visual if they need for it to be auditory attention, or maybe tactile attention if you're touching their arm and doing hand under hand with them. If we're trying to get them to understand a symbol that we're using, sometimes our minds kind of want to go to like, oh, let's do a picture symbol for them. Let's, have these pictures that are around the room. But remember, individuals with CVI might really have a hard time recognizing those pictures and connecting them to a real object. So one of the best things that we can do is use a real object. So when it's time for a diaper change, we show them a diaper. Or when it is time for snack time, we actually show them what the spoon is, and then they can use that as a cue. If you're someone who really wants to learn more about this, one of my favorite resources is this little sheet, and it is the 3-dimensional to 2-dimensional progression continuum for individuals with CVI, and it can kind of help with deciding what kind of symbols maybe you might use if you're a classroom teacher or you're working with children learning to recognize pictures. All right, I know mealtime is another big one. It happens multiple times a day. So something that we can do is control the sensory environment. Sometimes that can be challenging, but putting up a little corral for the child to kind of have sensory information blocked out can be really helpful. Showing mealtime items prior to the meal. Again, we're working on that symbolic development. And then this photo here is of a spoon that has a light paired inside it. At VIPS, we're working on a project where we have adapted lighted spoons, and we're almost to the finish line. I'm really excited about it, but this was one of our early prototypes. But one of the easy things you can do is if you do those little novelty finger lights, it's like a little ring, it has a little light on the top, you put your finger in it. Those are great because you can just put those around the handle of the spoon, and then magically you have a light up spoon, and now the child can participate in opening their mouth for the spoon coming to them. And light can also be, you can add light to their bottle. You can put a little scrunchie around their bottle for their preferred color, and then they can see their bottle better. So during self-care, things like if we want them to see their diaper, look at this easy adaptation. All we had to do is just put this little piece of glittery paper on it, and then every time before we change the diaper, we hold it up so then the child can see it. Think about how confusing it would be if you had someone care for you and you were never quite aware of what they were doing. Think about the impact that that would have on your development of toileting skills and independence with some of those self-care routines. Think about what we can do with a simple adaptation like this that can support that child in learning about what is happening, because we know we want them to develop to their highest potential, which is whatever that level of independence is. And if that involves just being able to see their diaper so they can learn to make that connection, how easy and how magical is that? Some things you can also do are sometimes sitting side to side versus face to face. And this isn't necessarily during a toileting routine, but just in any routine where you're self-care or feeding or anything like that. Because oftentimes, as I was sharing, that central visual field might be challenged, but to the side, the child's going to see you better or see their peer better. And then this is kind of one of the last slides as we think about all of those strategies. And really I've given you all some ideas that are concrete, but really what our brains can do is go back to those 10 visual behavioral characteristics and also think about how when we're looking for a child who has CVI to interact with their environment, first we want to ensure that they see it. Are they looking in the first place? Then we want to make sure, can they find it? Do they know where it is in space when we're not showing it to them? And then are they starting to recognize it? Can they use it in context? Do they have a memory of what that item or what that picture is? And so if our minds are always thinking about that as we're working with individuals with CVI, we can come up with any strategy that will support them, because if we are cognizant of those things, then we can support them with strategies that make sense for them. I'm going to share with you some some resources to learn more on your own. And this will be included in the slides that you'll get after today. And then we're going to pop back to our learning objectives. So I want you to just take a look at those. And as you're taking a look at those, try to kind of remember in your mind, see if you can describe a behavioral or functional characteristic of CVI. See if you can remember how injury to the brain leads to functional difficulties. See if you can remember a couple of strategies. While you're doing that, maybe Debbie, you might have been monitoring the chat, or if someone has a question, I'd love to entertain some questions now.
Yes, there was a question that was in there. I'm going to go ahead and drop it back in so that way you can just see. Or it says, I have a little boy with CVI in my class, and he gets overstimulated when there's a loud noise. He kicks, throws, and cries. What can I do to help him with this?
First of all, I would say if there's a teacher of the visually impaired or a VIPS provider that sees that child, make sure you consult with them. But some general strategies that can work are you can dim the lights in your classroom to kind of decrease some of that visual information. You can position him so that he is like in like a cozy area of the room. Like if you can make a low complexity area in the room, like a refrigerator box, if there's any, if you have something that's more high tech than that, you can do that. So those sorts of things can be really helpful. And I know sometimes it's challenging to control the sound that's in the classroom, but if you can, that's really helpful. And any sorts of like visually simple toys, like things like those glitter bottles that have like the glitter that moves, if that's like a solid color, that can be really helpful. It can also be helpful if you have like light table or light box things that are, just a couple of those for him to play with when he's off in that quiet area. So I hope those are some strategies that will work for you. All right, Angie wanted to ask the same question as well.
I didn't see any other questions. If anyone else has a question, go ahead and throw it in chat. There you go.
Okay, no question or anything, but this class is a huge eye-opener for someone who's never heard of CVI. It definitely helps with knowing what to look for and how to notice CVI in a child who we may not even realize has it. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. You guys now are the ambassadors, and if you suspect that a child has CVI, then now you know what to look for. And if the child is ages birth to 3, if you are interested and the family gives consent, you can make a referral to VIPS right on our website. I'll let you guys take the last couple of minutes, and if you could just write one thing that you learned. You don't have to write to every learning objective, but just pick one of those and just kind of put a takeaway in the chat. Can CVI be a result of traumatic brain injury or not? Yes, it absolutely can. We very often receive referrals for children who have abusive head trauma. So that's a common cause of CVI, or like a car accident, things like that would be causes of CVI, yes. I love the elephant outlined in red in our classroom and teaching the parts of an animal or item. Each part taught is outlined in red. Yes, absolutely, Michelle. That's one way to teach parts and recognition of different animals. So you can take your books and outline them in the child's preferred color. We learned how her children with CVI view things differently than other children, how it impacts their learning. Videos were helpful. Thanks, they're always fun. I love showing off my kiddos. Learning different parts of the brain. Injury can interfere with facial recognition. Yep, making connections. That's right. Wearing neutral colors to allow them to focus. Yep. If you ever become a teacher of the visually impaired, you will get a really big part of your closet that's all black shirts. I know from experience. So just learning about CVI, just that it's a new thing. Simple strategies. Thank you. Learning about hand under hand. I'm going to flip to the next slide while you guys are putting more information there, since our time is coming to a close. Self-care routines. If you'd like to contact me, my email is pmaynard@vips.org. If you're interested in learning more about what VIPS does, you can go to our website at vips.org, and there's a referral button at the top, and that's where you can make a referral.
Right. Thank you, Paige. I'll go ahead and close us out. I just dropped the evaluation survey link in the chat again. But so yeah, thanks, Paige, for giving this valuable training. We appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. Thanks everyone for joining today, and thanks to the Cozier for Kids Basic Movement for hosting this training.